Hi, welcome to today's episode, How Curiosity Can Reduce Fear and Create More Peace in Your Life. Today, I'm joined by Adina Tovell. She is the CEO of Courage to be Curious, and she's an internationally recognized curiosity advocate, a human development professional, podcast host, and a keynote speaker. Through almost 3 decades of working with people, Adina has discovered the power of curiosity to heal, catalyze growth, and achieve sustainable levels of happiness and contentment. I'm so thrilled to have you with me here today, Adina.
Well, thank you, Teresa. I am so thrilled to be here. I've loved watching everything you're putting out there, your journey, the way that you bring healing into the world. And I'm just very honored and excited to be talking with you today.
Thank you. And I am equally excited because I've watched you develop, Courage to be Curious, and it is such a powerful, powerful tool. And so we're going to have some great resources today to share with our audience. Just as a brief history, you and I met networking on LinkedIn probably about 7 years ago, and we discovered that we were both graduates of IPEC, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And I think you and I both agree that that's probably the best coaching institute in the world. We are proud to be graduates of IPEC, and we became friends. And probably within less than a year, I took the train out of my sleepy little town here in North Carolina. I caught the Amtrak and ended up at 30th Street Station in Philadelphia, where you picked me up, and we went off to a training class that weekend, and we've been fast and furious friends ever since.
Absolutely. And yes, we've been on the journey together and watching the developments and learning so much from each other too, which is what I've really appreciated.
Yeah, and that's something that I wanted to mention because we are two professionals who are all about collaboration as opposed to competition, and it really has served us. And I'm all about collaborating so that we can get the world healed.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. So let's get into our episode. So would you like to explain to our audience exactly what courageous curiosity is?
I would love to, right? My favorite topic to talk about courageous curiosity. So I was recently asked, how do you define curiosity? What does that mean? And the basic definition of this curiosity is the desire to know something, wanting to understand. The courageous part comes in when we seek to understand things that might feel a little bit scary or might feel unknown or might feel like they touch into slightly vulnerable places. But our willingness to get courageously curious, to touch into those places, produces great rewards for us, that we're willing to go toward what's vulnerable, what's scary, what's uncertain, what's unknown in order to grow. And that for me is the essence of courageous curiosity. And that applies whether it's growing ourselves individually, our own personal development, leadership development, how we show up in our companies and our organizations, how we lead others, and in relationships, our most precious and intimate relationships as parents, as spouses, or significant others, or siblings even.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you discover the power of curious questions?
So the discovery actually came from a really personal experience that dates back to when we were going through IPEC. And we were in our second day of training. And Teresa, you might keep me honest here and say, Adina, the thing you're describing, I never even remember that happening, because I have wondered sometimes if my entire subconscious created this entire experience for me and it didn't really happen. But on the second day of our training, as I remember it, there was a small exercise at the bottom of one of the pages that said, list 3 things that make you happy. And I read this and it was like one of those moments, my whole body just kind of froze. I started to sweat and I was like, I have got to get out of here. I'm in a coach training where they are looking for the person who's sweating it out right now so they can bring them into live coaching. And I was like, I'm not going to be that person. But I was sweating it out because I had no way to answer that question. I didn't know the answer to that question. And there's a whole host of reasons. And I've talked about it actually with my 85-year-old mother. And I grew up in an immigrant household and we just didn't talk about happiness. It wasn't part of the conversation. But every time friends at school would talk about hobbies and what do you do for fun and what do you love, I really had no answer to those kinds of questions. But I decided in that moment, I didn't race out of the room, which was actually my instinct, but I stayed in my chair and I kept myself glued there. And I said, I have to be able to figure out what that is. And then here, Teresa, here's what happened is I said, well, I can't keep saying what makes you happy because people have been asking me that my whole life and I still have no answer to it. But I said, I'm sure that there has to be a question that can move me further along. We were in coach training and learning about questions. So I made a commitment after I didn't get called on and, the universe or God spared me of that humiliation in that moment that I would relentlessly pursue the answer. And so I constructed this question for myself that said, if I was committed to understanding happiness and being happy, what would I choose in this moment? And so I took it home and I said, if somebody asks me, where do you want to go for dinner? And I'm committed to my own happiness, what would I choose? Instead of saying, whatever you want, I would make a choice. Or if somebody were to say, I'll pick up your kids from daycare and I get 30 extra minutes. If my commitment is to be happy, what might I do with those 30 minutes? And Teresa, the last thing I just want to say about this, if people are saying, okay, well, that seems really cool, but how did you know what the answer to that question was? And I didn't always know, but I trusted that just the same way, like if I kept going to the gym and first day I walk into the gym and all I can lift is a 3-pound weight. Well, if I want to lift a 20-pound weight, I've got to keep going to the gym and keep lifting, and eventually I will. And the same exact thing happened with this question. When I first started asking it, I didn't have very many answers, or I was very tentative and felt like I wasn't sure. But just like building a muscle, the more I asked, the more actually surprisingly, amazingly answers started to bubble up, and I started to figure out what makes me happy. And that's how, to answer your question, when did I first discover the power of questions? That was that moment.
Okay, so first of all, you are not making that up. I attended in Atlanta. I don't know what campus you attended, but we were not in class together. Again, we found each other afterward. But yeah, I remember that exercise. So no. It was real, and you're right. Trained as proficient coaches, it's all about asking the right questions. Yet, my experience with you and watching you grow is you've taken this further, and this productive curiosity is just really mind-blowing. I just want everybody to know that because I've experienced it both in some of your programs and just having you as my friend. So let me ask you this. What makes a productively curious question different than the standard question?
That's a great question. Right. What makes a productively curious question different? So there are questions that we ask and answer all day. What time is dinner? When is that meeting scheduled? Are you going here? And those questions are largely informational. We're collecting data and we're collecting information. They are productive in the sense that, they give us the information that we need. But when I talk about productively curious questions, they are questions that move something inside us. They actually produce a shift in thinking and feeling and in belief systems. And so for me, I always know, I like to say to people, I'm not on brand if by the time I finish talking with someone, they haven't said, That's a really good question. And not just the words, but, the turning of the eyes upward that indicates that they're going into a place of reflection that is going to reveal something to them in a different way than they've thought about it before. Productively curious questions grow us. They move us, they shift us, they produce or reveal something that was not there before.
Wow, that's incredible. And so I've heard you talk about how the mind responds differently to questions. And I was very intrigued when I heard you speak about this. Could you tell our audience how the mind responds to questions differently?
Sure. There is this activity of the mind called instinctive elaboration. And so the easiest way is, have you ever been sitting, let's picture ourselves sitting maybe out to dinner or at a bar at a restaurant with somebody, and someone says, hey, do you know? And we say, I don't know. Let me ask Siri, right? And we read the question into our phone. And the reason we do that so quickly and instinctively is that when someone asks a question that captures the attention of the mind, it immediately creates a desire to know. And so our desire to know can kick in almost any direction. But when we use a productively curious question, we direct the mind to instinctively want to know more about something that's important. And many people are familiar with the phrase, where the attention goes, the energy flows. So one of my favorite examples is, I remember this was years ago. I was in a minivan driving with some friends, and the woman in the car had just bought a Mini Cooper. I had no idea what a Mini Cooper was at the time. I'd never even heard of such a thing. I suddenly discovered it's a car, right? And their family had this game that they played on car rides of counting how many Mini Coopers they would see. They took a lot of long car rides. And suddenly, like, they're out the window and they're counting. And I'm like, I've never seen one of these before in my life, right? And suddenly they're like, they're up to like 56, right? In a matter of time in the car. And I'm suddenly thinking, like, did the heavens just open up and release a bunch of Mini Coopers onto the road? But no, what happened is I was never looking for them before, so I never saw any. But as soon as my mind and my attention was directed, suddenly all these Mini Coopers were revealed. And this is the amazing thing about the mind, is that if there is a place we want to grow, if we know how to productively direct the mind to put attention to this, then we really can facilitate growth. And I want to make a distinction here, because this is the productive versus unproductive. Unproductive says, oh my gosh, I really stink at this. I'm not good at this. I just need to get better at this. Every time I, don't know this, this is what happens. This is unproductive, right? This is just beating oneself up, which only reinforces to the mind that I am a failure at this particular thing or incapable. But when we structure a really well-designed, productively curious question for the mind to think, ooh, that's juicy. Ooh, I want to figure that out. Even if we don't immediately know the answer, because we're not Siri, right? In Google, we don't know the answer. The mind will suddenly say, let me scan for information or evidence or something that I can consume that will help me to understand that better. And this is a natural thing. We don't have to do anything to make it happen except ask a productively curious question.
That is fascinating. So it kind of shifts the brain into a different dimension where it starts to seek answers. It's looking for answers. Yeah.
Right? And if we direct the mind well, then we direct our growing and our development and broadening of our perspectives and deepening of our understandings, all with a question.
So in our training, we were taught that 80 to 90% of the population lives in catabolic energy, which is the stress, the fight or flight response. And that was many years before we entered into this season of stress that we're navigating through now. So, what kind of questions can people begin to ask themselves in order to manage this stress?
Beautiful, beautiful question. In terms of when we're feeling stress, first of all, I like to say, and I've just done a video short on this that is in our YouTube channel, but it is, first of all, I'd like to say to people, stress is a physiological experience. It's not actually a feeling. And Teresa, I just wanted to mention this because you and I work in the feelings world, that I almost get worried that we're becoming a little feelings illiterate because we're using stress and anxiety to cover any and every experience that we have emotionally that might be the slightest bit uncomfortable or tap us in some way or another. And instead of identifying real feelings, we just call everything stress and anxiety. So I just want to mention that. But how do questions really help? And the beautiful thing is that, and I want everybody to think about this, you can't actually be either judgmental or stressed and curious at the same time, right? You can't be. Curiosity by its definition means I'm open, I'm receptive, I'm in a state of wonder. And the other means I'm closed, I'm grasping for security, I'm, certain about something and I'm not moving from it. And so the questions by themselves, if we can get behind asking them, will automatically switch and move us if we can genuinely get into that state of curiosity. To get more specific, though, how can a question change things? And I'm going to use a really personal example right now. My mom has been pretty sick, and I have been doing some caregiving with her and things like that. And she's in a place where there actually isn't anything anybody can do, right? I've been doing my best to just care and make her comfortable. She's seen a lot of doctors, and there's not a lot that can happen. And so I was feeling a lot of stress around this for a while. And then I said to myself, what can you ask yourself here? Like, what's important to understand? And I posed this question to myself. If there's nothing that I or anybody else with all the efforts we're making can do to change the situation, what do I have control over that would bring more ease and calm, right? And I posed that question to myself. And where I ultimately landed with it is that I know my mother is suffering. And what I want to put out into the world is that whatever is happening with her suffering, that there will be a path to ease and comfort for her. And so either that might be her letting go into a place where, she needs to let go from all of this, or perhaps an intervention that is not seeable from here will happen. But I realized my stress was not doing anything to help her or me, but my shifting to say, what if I just place an intention of peace for her into the world, and I put all of my energy towards that? But I had to first pose the question to myself and say, if this isn't going to be helpful, if there's nothing more we can actually do to intervene, what might I do that would lead us both, me for sure, and her possibly, to a place of greater ease? And so I posed that question. I have similar things that happen in my business, right? You and I are in business for ourselves, and we talk a lot about times when things don't seem to be going the way we wanted them to go or we thought they would go, right? And we can I like to think of it as push against it, like bang our heads against that brick wall that appears to be standing in front of us, except that it only gives me a headache to do it, to bang my head against that brick wall. Or I could reframe the question. If this direction is not moving and flowing easily right now, how might I pivot to help things move more smoothly? And just when I ask that question, allows for the possibility that there is a pivot. If I keep forcing myself and pushing myself toward that brick wall, there's no possibility of a pivot. So when I talk about the fact that curiosity has the power to heal our wounds, or help us solve problems, or, help us move through situations, it's putting together the fact that I can ask myself a question that shifts the direction of my mind and my attention and my energy to something else. And in that space, and opening 100% of the time, I can't even say 99, Teresa, but 100% of the time, there is an opening that allows a new possibility to come through.
So I love that because, as you know, in my work with helping people heal, I ask them to keep an eye on their feelings. Some people say, watch your thoughts, but that's really hard. Because we are thinking beings. And so, I think you would go crazy if you tried to monitor your thoughts. But one thing you do have the power over is to monitor your feelings. And so when it starts to feel bad, or, when you get that knot in your stomach or that negative hit of intuition, then you can ask yourself, what am I thinking about that's causing me to feel this way? And then that would open you right up to the pivoting question, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What might I be thinking about that would direct toward how I want to feel, right?
Right. Because you and I both know that, and that's one of the reasons that we're having this conversation, is that stress puts us into fight or flight, and which releases cortisol and adrenaline into our system, and that is damaging our immune system, and it's accelerating the aging process, and none of us really want that. And so we need to turn that off as quickly as possible. And like you said earlier, it's like going into the gym, and wanting to pick up that weight. Well, it might not happen the first day, but with practice and patience and dedication, you can make it happen. So I know there are people listening who are probably under all types of stress and anxiety that, maybe you and I can't relate to. But stress is stress. Wouldn't you agree?
Stress is stress, and stress is always shiftable. And one of the things I wanted to mention here, because I think it's so important, is that, and I mean, I've seen this come up, and I love to share this story. When my daughter was in 3rd grade and we were talking about something that happened to school, and I said, well, I went and talked to your teacher because you've been crying every day and complaining and so upset about this. And she says to me, Mommy, don't you understand? The bad stories are just so much more interesting to tell. Right? And I mean, it was like from the mouth of babes, right? That here she comes with this incredible wisdom. But let's think about how many of us fall into that sinkhole that we get drawn into just telling the negative stories and the dramas and the traumas and what's difficult and all of those things and what's hard. And we almost become like addicted. I mean, we're in a pandemic of COVID, but I think we've for a long time been in a pandemic of stress and anxiety, because not only are we suffering from it, but we pass it on to each other every time we talk about it, right? But we tend to believe that the negative stuff is more true than the positive stuff. We're so compelled that, oh, well, that's just Pollyanna. That's just positive thinking. That's not reality. The bad stuff is the reality, right? Well, think about what we do to ourselves in that. And what would happen if we shifted and allowed ourselves to say, both are equally true, but I get to choose which reality to sit in.
Exactly. And what most people probably don't know is that we are hardwired to think toward the negative. It's part of our fight or flight response. And the problem comes in when, in today's day and age, we no longer have to be wary of the saber-toothed tiger. Yet our fight or flight response still goes off. And oftentimes, it never gets turned off. So we live in a constant state of fight or flight. And that right there is just going to open you up for chronic health conditions.
So I want everybody to picture that there's actually a dial that they have control over, like a TV dial. Back in the old days when I was a kid, right? And TVs actually had dials instead of.
I know. I'm actually older than you are, so.
Or maybe our radios, but that one part of the dial goes toward fear and anxiety and stress, and I could flip it to the other direction and it would show curiosity. And which station do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the fear and anxiety station, or do you want to be on the curiosity? Because the truth is, you can never be on both at the same time, but you do get to choose.
Yes, you do. I love that. And we have a beautiful compliment here from Alex. Alex, thank you very much. We're happy that you're gaining value out of this. So hopefully we'll get you some more value. Yeah, we always get to choose. And again, it's like any other thing that you want to change, whether it be weight loss or going to the gym, developing any kind of new habit. It takes dedication, practice, and consistency. So it might be hard in the beginning. I'm a big proponent of putting those post-it notes everywhere. And with today's technology, I put little reminders in my calendar that just go off to remind me to do things. And so you might develop some productively curious questions and just post them on your calendar and remind yourself to ask, what could I do better at this moment? What am I focusing on at this moment? Why do I feel stressed? When I'm coaching someone who has been chronically ill, I've worked with people who have been chronically ill for 30 years, and they've got to break some habits. And so, oftentimes you'll get that negative Nelly friend who calls and wants to you say, "Hi, how are you?" And then they jump right into their drama, I call it a verbal vomit, and you get splattered with all this negativity. And it's okay to have healthy boundaries and just shut that down and say, "Oh my gosh, my mom's calling on the other line. I need to go."
Yeah, right.
Find ways to shut it down.
Absolutely. You can shut it down, and then, sometimes I have that rare moment where you can ask a question that pivots them from the vomit to something else.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will, what benefit are you and I'll say to them, are you getting benefit by sharing this with me in this way? Or might you get more benefit by sharing about something else? Or would you like me to share something that might, help you be in a better mood? And so that's the beauty. That's what I love about it, right? And Teresa, what you and I do professionally is we do ask those questions that help to activate those pivots, but we all can learn to use those questions. And I wanted to just insert one more little thing there. As people, you use the word habit, which is exactly right? We're breaking the habits. And people often ask me about journaling. In fact, I just had a great conversation with a client, and they said, "Could you break it down for me about this journaling thing?" And one of the things I said to them is, if you were to open up my journal, you would see that many of the entries, or all of the entries that are just kind of narrative, begin with a question. I want my journaling to be productive. When I hear people say, "Oh, I journal, but I can't stay with it, I quit," I think it's because people believe that journaling is a recounting of things. And if you just recount and they all feel negative to you, then you just recount them, but you land at the end in the same place you were when you started, or maybe even someplace deeper sunk into whatever was the stressor. When you begin your journaling with a productively curious question, it is amazing to see the direction that your own elaboration will go in over the course of the journaling. And then I'll find I start with one question, and then it'll feed and I'll ask more questions. So I love journaling with questions as a way to shifting the habit.
I love that. And oftentimes, and I'm certain you experience this with your clients as well. When I ask a client, what do they really want out of the current situation that they're struggling with, they'll give me a whole list of things that they don't want. So that's our tendency, and it's not good or bad, right or wrong. It just is. And so then, it's important to refocus yourself and turn that around. Wouldn't that be a productively curious question? What is it that I do want?
One of the most productive, because we can only achieve something or attain something if we actually know what it is. And you're right, that is one of the things that keeps people stuck, is they define their aspirations in terms of what they don't want. And the mind is kind of like, well, okay, but where am I supposed to go?
Right. Yeah. So how could people get started? I mean, you already talked about the journaling. I think that's an excellent way, but are there some other ways that people could get started with productive curiosity?
Sure. Well, I want to just mention a few things that we have. And because as I started to talk about productively curious questions with my clients, I realize it takes some practice to get there. We don't all naturally think in terms of the language of what I would call productively curious questions. And so sat down and developed some card decks which provide people with questions and to journal, to use in different settings. And so one of them, I'm just going to share them here, is Live with the Courage to Be Curious, which are questions that activate consciousness and intentionality in our lives. Lead, for leaders and organizations to really become self-aware of themselves and their relationship and how they lead their teams. And then one of our favorite decks is the Love with the Courage to Be Curious. Half of the questions are really to cultivate self-love, and the other are to support us in being more loving and compassionate with people that matter to us: spouses, partners, children, good friends. And so the card decks, which are on the Courage to Be Curious website, is one way that people can begin to get curious. And there's also a link that we're going to provide under this post shortly, or a link that we provide, which is to one of our downloads, 5 game-changing questions and how they can transform your life. And so they give a little bit more behind the story for me as to how they all got started, but give people 5 questions, really, really powerful, rich questions to start with, and a process to go through to begin to activate their own thinking, particularly if their goal is to know themselves better and to really tap into their own inner strength.
Okay, and so just to reiterate, we'll be posting all of that in the comments section shortly after we finish this interview. So I participated in one of your programs, maybe a year ago, Women Leading with Productive Curiosity. And there were all types of women in there. There were mothers and business owners and, grandmothers, retirees. And so we were led on this journey to ask productively curious questions to move us forward in whatever area of our lives we wanted forward momentum. And my question was in regard to my business, and it was in regard to increasing my productivity. And so then you put us into breakout rooms, and I was with 2 other people, and we were talking about our questions, and I realized, it hit me, that my question was a facade. It was just a cover-up for the deeper question that needed to be asked. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. And I love that you shared that experience. The journey of discovery, whether we're discovering about our business, about ourselves, about our relationships, maybe it sounds cliche at this point, but it is like the onion. There are so many layers. I can't tell you, Teresa, how many times I've looked at an issue in my life and said, this is the question. And then I ask that question, and then I'm like, there's something underneath that. I got to peel that one off, right? It's like peeling off the sticky notes, right? I keep getting to the next sticky note. And so I peeled that one off. And then I'm like, okay, this is the area I need to pursue now. And I ask the question. And then as I'm exploring it, either that's not quite the question, or wait, there's still more. Peel off that question. And so what I would say is that your experience is the experience. That it's not about, do I know the perfect question, but it's about asking the question and following the journey, the breadcrumbs of where it leads. When I was saying to you, when I journal myself and I begin with a question, and then as I'm writing, I arrive at new questions and I literally pose them in my journey, it's that whole journal. Okay, that was an interesting question. And through that, I came to an understanding which reveals something new. And that's what happened for you. By asking that question and getting curious about it, you suddenly discovered that that's not actually getting me exactly where I want to go. There is something else here. But what a powerful journey. And the questions kind of laid out a path for you to get there. If you'd never asked that first question, you would have stayed where you were.
Yeah, it was, I remember coming out of the breakout room, just being in awe. And I remember sharing my experience with the group because it just really blew me away. I've been on a long journey, 10 years with a chronic health condition, and pulling myself out of that and opening myself up to honesty, which you need to do if you have a chronic health condition. And there I was, I caught myself fooling myself again. So it was a very powerful moment for me. What else would you like to add, or what final thoughts would you like to leave our audience with today?
I think one of the really important things that I like to convey about curiosity is that curiosity is a disposition, right? It's not just something we do about asking questions, because we can ask questions that don't really come from a curious place. We've all been on the other side of that, where somebody will say something, well, don't you think that? And we know that they were like, oh, they already know what it is. It's supposed to happen here. Or someone will ask a question in a way that doesn't really feel very open. But curiosity is a disposition of openness. It is a disposition of wonderment. And we associate it with children because children have far fewer barriers that get in the way of their naturally being curious and being in that state of wonder. The reason I feel so passionately is that the only avenue to growth and development in our deepest, most precious relationships with others and with ourselves, in our leadership and our organizations, is to be open to something else. Otherwise, we're just stuck. I often say that the opposite of curiosity is not apathy, it's certainty. It's that I'm certain that this is how things are. I'm certain that things aren't going to change. I'm certain that this is how that person will respond to me. That is the opposite of curiosity. Nothing magical, wonderful, or beautiful ever happens from that place of certainty. But incredible, magical, wonderful, unexpected, wondrous things happen from a place of curiosity.
That is really beautiful. So we can start to ask ourselves these important questions. Why am I so stressed? What am I thinking about that's causing me stress? And we can begin to move ourselves to a better place. Would you please repeat the question that you asked yourself about your mother's current condition, the situation?
Yeah. So I really talked about in there, if there's nothing more that she or I can do to improve her physical condition, what could I do that would move me and possibly her to a more peaceful place?
So that is the perfect question for everyone listening to this, except they can simply extract you and your mom and put themselves in there.
Absolutely.
That is a beautiful question. Okay, well, how can people learn more about you?
So people can learn more about us. We have an active podcast, Courage to be Curious with Adina Tovell. There are more than 150 episodes on there, all kinds of things, all focused on how we wonder our way to brilliant with productively curious questions. And we are couragetobecurious.com, which is our website. And then we have our handle all over social media, and we are on Instagram, we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter. Courage to be Curious is our handle, except on Twitter, where we are at Curiosity Speaks. But we are easy to find as long as you can get those 4 words, Courage to be Curious, out.
Excellent. Excellent. And again, we will put that all in the comment section of, after this recording ends. We'll get it in there as quickly as possible so that anyone who is interested in connecting with you and learning more can do so. And I'm assuming you have, in addition to your card decks, which I know you sell, I'm assuming you have some free resources on your website also?
We do have resources. I have resources a little bit on gratitude journaling. We have resources, as I said, these 5 game-changing questions and how they can transform your life. And we have other activities that people can do to begin this practice of productive curiosity. And I will say that the podcast every single week, this is what we do. We take the journey of a question and we pursue it in a productively curious way. And so there is just no better way to really getting familiar with this process. Take the questions directly from the podcast and begin to explore them for yourselves. That is a great way to get started on the journey.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions, so I think we will wrap it up. Again, I honor the work that you do. I thank you for being so gracious, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me today and to talk about this topic.
Well, thank you, Teresa. I mean, it has been totally a pleasure, every single second of it, to be here.
Excellent. Excellent. Same here. All right, Adina. Well, we will talk again soon. And, maybe we'll actually see each other again sometime soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye now.
Bye-bye.